Welcome everybody to the live stream. I think I got to bring you in here. So let's add Francesco in here now. We're going to add you to the right of me. There we go. Hello. Francesco, thanks for joining me today for this conversation. If you are here live, just let me know in the chat. I'm going to jump over here onto YouTube here. Yeah, there we go. We've got a few people that are kind of in there. Yep, there we go. So it's been a while, my friend, since we've seen each other.
Hasn't it? Yeah, it's been a fair. Yeah, how have things been with developing? Are you still doing the calendar side of stuff?
The which stuff? The
calendar? The yearly
calendar?
Yeah,
yeah. That's right. Actually, I mean, if I turn the camera ever so, you will see that there it is right there. So it has already got some stuff filled out in it and so on and so forth. But brilliant. Yeah, we've been it's been interesting the way we've been kind of growing. The focus has been largely on my community over the last little while, like Time Crafting Trust Premium. For those of you that are watching live that are not premium members, you can go to I'll put a link into the comments later so that you can join. But there's been a focus on that. Of course, I've got the Productivity Diet book that is coming out early this year, which I'm excited for. I'm also, there we go. We got Pete. There's some people that are members of the community that are chiming in on the chat right now. We got Dan for Tucson. We got Pete, who, yeah, my camera's bouncing because I was moving it. So there we go. We'll I'm not going to touch it anymore, Pete. Pete is actually in the UK as well. Janet is here. That's great to see. But yeah, like the focus has been largely on building stuff for the community and then sending it outward. So for example, Time Crafting and Todoist was a good example. We built that. Ron's here as well. Good to see you, Ron. We built that for the community and then we sold it a la carte outside of the community. So that's kind of what we're doing. We're actually working on, and for those watching this now are going to get a sense of it. We've done one tool-based program, right? So one tool-based course, Time Crafting and Todoist, of course, which I have the most familiarity with. As you know, we both spent a lot of time in Todoist. The next one in the Time Crafting in app series, which one do you think it is, Francesco? Which one do you think would be the smartest business-oriented app for me to show people how to do time crafting inside of Next?
Notion?
Bing, bing, bing. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Time Crafting and Notion will be coming in March of 2024.
Nice.
It is a mammoth beast of a application to get through. We're going to talk a bit about the apps today as you and I have our conversation around, Keeping Productive, Toolfinder, all that. I want to talk about Bento a bit too, if that's okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That sounds
all that stuff. So good to see everybody here. Sarah's here again. Sarah works with me in the community as my operations assistant. She's amazing. Rani here as well. So we've got a lot of great community members that are joining us. But for those that don't know, what we're going to do is, this is a live recording of a productive conversation. This will be episode 511, which I think is coming out in 2 weeks. So we're doing this now. I've hit the record button on my Rodecaster Pro here. And what we're going to do is, Francesco, you have to introduce yourself. And then we get right into the conversation. So we'll do that. For those that are watching live, they're going to get the whole preamble of me saying, welcome to it, but in this instance, you still need to you have a job. And your job is to say, hi, state your name. And I'm about to have a productive conversation with Mike Vardy. And then we just get right into it. Okay? So, and by the way, before we do that, if anybody watching this live on YouTube has questions that they want to ask, put them in the chat and I will do my best to get to them. So that way your question may appear on the released version of the podcast. And for those of you watching the recording of this, you're getting an advanced sneak peek at the podcast episode that's going to be released on audio in 2 weeks. So again, we're going to go into the thick of it. So Francesco, your line is, hi, state your name. Don't say state your name though.
Yeah.
And I'm about to have a productive conversation with Mike Vardy. All right, ready? We're going to count.
Okay.
Right. 3, 2, 1, go.
Hello, I'm Francesco D'Alessio, and I'm about to have a productive conversation with Mike Vardy.
Francesco, thanks so much for taking the time to join me today on A Productive Conversation. And for A Productive Conversation, probably we should say this is a very productive conversation I think we're about to have. Wouldn't you say?
Let's hope. Yeah, let's hope it is.
So for
I'm
those,
hoping to learn some things.
so for those that aren't familiar with your work, I mean, we're doing this on YouTube as we're recording this. This has been live streamed on YouTube first and foremost. So for those that are watching this on YouTube, they're very well aware of who you are at this point if you're following the productivity space. But for those that aren't familiar, just share a little bit about you and what, kind of a brief introduction, if you will.
Yeah, sure. So like yourself, Mike, I was very inspired by apps and productivity software. And I started a YouTube channel about 10 years ago called Keep Productive. And I've sort of constantly been obsessed with how productivity software has evolved and which ones. And I've just sort of evolved that, and the YouTube channel has very much grown, and we're now sort of putting a lot of time and attention into sort of cataloging every productivity tool and making a more sort of personalized engine to finding the perfect one for you.
Excellent. And Bento, did you touch on Bento there just a second ago?
I have. We have dabbled in creating our own productivity app. It's called Bento. It's a to-do list application with a sort of opinion, which limits you to 3 tasks a day, large, medium, and small, like a bento box. Although we sort of pressed pause on it for a little bit to sort of rethink the concept, and we're redeveloping it now to have an entirely different focus. But largely what spawned off of that was the bento methodology, which sort of was a system that I ended up creating accidentally from the app. And yeah, just all about prioritization, really.
That's interesting. Okay, so what's fascinating to me is we've always talked, I mean, you and I have been fans of David Allen's work for a long time. And there was always this idea that there should be a GTD app, right? Or there should be a, and remember, what was the 30-30-30, which was like the Eisenhower matrix apps. Remember that 30/30 app that was for the iPhone? And there's been a few of those that are for the Eisenhower or Covey matrix. So in most instances, people want an app for the framework or the process or the approach. So what you're telling me, and I didn't know this, is that it was the app came first and then the methodology came second. How did that happen?
I have no idea. I think it was like I came up with this concept from the way that Japanese prepare bento boxes for the day ahead. And I quite like that concept, and the way that they had those compartmentalizing of different things, of the sizes of the different food that they put in. And I think that concept of preparation in advance and a focus on not stuffing your box outside of it. I think there was not a productivity app out there that has limits and says you're not allowed to add any more tasks, be a bit more ruthless about what you choose. So we went from that theory, and it was very interesting what happened, because we released the app, then we released the methodology, and the methodology has expanded since, because we thought 3 tasks, 5 tasks, and 7 tasks is a bit more practical for everyday people. But when we released the app, we didn't realize that the 3 task system was actually really effective with those who had ADHD and autism as well, and particularly in children, because it gave them that focus of, I need to start a task and a timer at the same time and have that limitation, and that gave them that focus. So yeah, it's been a really interesting journey. I don't know why Apple have called us one of their best to-do list applications. That's still very confusing.
I think it's the design. I think it's a skeuomorphic design that you re-embrace, because that went away for a while. The skeuomorphic design went away for a while. Everything became very utilitarian, very brutalist in a lot of ways. But Bento, and what I think, you're talking about the kids aspect too. I think there's a bunch of fascinating things that I loved about Bento, especially when I did the video review of it, which I'll put up Okay, where will it be in the video? It'll be up over. No, it'll be here. It'll be above
I've got
Francesco's.
mine again, yeah.
It'll block Francesco's face. But the point is that we've heard of three big rocks, the three MITs. What I liked about that was it was more of a things lived within that. So instead of three big rocks, it was three rocks, one small, one big, one medium, right? Like that kind of thing.
Yeah.
How important is it for you, having spent a lot of time in this space now, you know, building tools, building apps, etc. How have you noticed that frameworks, like the approach, is more important than the app? Because I think that we've had this conversation before privately, where it's like people love their apps. They love even the app will do the thing. And because you've explored so many apps, in fact, with Toolfinder, you continue to do that. What do you have to say to people who are like, if I can just get this app will take care of it? Like, what are some of the things that people need to go in to an app with when they're discovering apps, so that they don't get caught up in the app didn't do it for me, so clearly the app is the problem, or clearly, you know, I'm the problem, right?
Oh, like I see it every single day. Like I speak to a lot of people about apps and software, and I sort of put them in two categories of people, and it's no fault of their own a lot of the time. I think what it is for those who come and hunt for the apps first, they typically don't stay with an app as long as somebody who does. So I think I've estimated to be round about 6 to 12 months with an app without a framework, and that's definitely something that, whilst it's helpful, it's not something that's gonna. It's a framework. It needs to be strong at the foundations. But those who do come in with a framework and then choose an app and layer it on top, they typically stay for around 2 to 3 years. So you can see the stark difference is 3 times longer. And that's what I really like. Whilst I talk about new apps and new software because I like trends, I get the most joy when people find an app and they stick with it for I think three years is a good transition period, because you get to that point where after 3 years, a lot of things change in your life, career, potentially having kids, potentially moving into a different area and things like that. Things change. So 3 years, I think it's fine. It typically, and longer is better. But yeah, I get so much joy when I think people connect with the right app. That makes me happy.
Bento's iOS only. Dan's asking in the chat here on YouTube. It's iOS only, right?
I have an Android, but we decided to remove it.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
All right. I want to go back to the kids thing here in a minute, because I think that's something I want to, because you've got 2 kids now. When we first met, you had 0 kids. We'll come back to that in a minute, but I want to talk about how what I've noticed about your growth with Keep Productive in particular is, and Dawn's got a question that we'll come to in a little bit too here on YouTube.
Oh, God.
But I want to ask you, because I've noticed that in your early days, I wouldn't say acquiesced isn't the right word, but because you were new to it, you didn't, your opinions were strong, but it almost felt like you were like, I don't want to take a full stand on an app because I'm so new and there's so many apps and I don't want to necessarily alienate anybody, right?
Yeah.
But I've noticed the experience level, the time, you have no problem now, you still are polite about it. Is it the Brit in you? I'm wondering, but you're still polite about it. But you're willing to be more, you're willing to be more critical in a constructive way. Whereas, have you noticed, like, so the way you've positioned yourself in that space, what have you noticed, and what have you noticed since over the evolution that's done for you and your channel and your business in terms of changing, like that journey? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, definitely. I think I started out, I remember when we had one of our first conversations and you were telling me about your experience with software and how keeping up with the Joneses with software is really, really hard. but it was weird because I 100% took that advice on and I mulled over it for weeks. But it was strange because I was a very strange kid in a way, because I used to go to App Store pages, the App Store updates page every single day and read through the release logs of every single app. And they weren't even productivity apps back in the day. And I don't know why, but I got an interest in incremental change with software. And I don't know whether that's an interest in software releases or in general, but I think for me, spending more time with software helps me to, I love all of those incremental changes and re-reviewing things and deeper diving into it and extensive thoughts, because I don't know why, I just have a weird interest in it. But I mean, I know that the market's getting bigger every single day. And I think the reason why we created something like Toolfinder is because I needed it to be my second brain of tools. And it allowed us to sort of also grow that into a more scalable thing, where instead of watching a million videos to get to the right one you find, is to go straight to the right software, which is most important to me, because I don't want to. I want people to get informative research about a tool, an opinion, but get to the solution fastest, ideally.
And I think that you're right. The landscape has continued to grow. We went from, I think when you started, we were in the quote GTD app era, the to-do list app era. I would say we're probably in the PKM app era now. Would you say that?
Yeah.
Or, okay, so if that's where we're at now, and we're going to come back to Don's question, and we've got a couple other, we got, OmniFocus, of course, there's a great example of one that has been fairly steadfast and knows who it serves, and they've made some slight changes, but nothing, massive in terms of who they're serving. I think that's the key. So what if we're in the era of PKM apps now, personal knowledge management apps, or the renaissance of productivity apps, let's say, what is next, especially with what's going on with Evernote? I mean, is AI the thing, or is it another type of app that you're seeing emerge?
Yeah. I mean, there's so many trends. I think what I call this new era that's going to happen is the anti-admin era. So I think we're going to get two camps.
Okay.
The productivity camp, where the tool helps you to do less administration, so you manage it less as like a system. You just sort of let it run, let it learn about you, let it make the right decisions for you. But then you're going to get the productivity apps we have now, like PKM, will turn into productivity mindfulness tools.
Right.
Because you're manualizing it, you're going in, you're changing things around. And I think that will be a practice of mindfulness more than it's a practice of productivity, because we won't need to do that, if that makes sense.
No, because we're going to be able to use artificial intelligence to a degree to handle some of that stuff for us.
Yeah. I mean, it won't be like do work. It'll be do the menial stuff that you move, like moving around stuff, organizing stuff. That'll be done for us. And it'll be a weird era.
Well, it'll be weird because there's nuance, right? And that's the thing, is that I've noticed this. I don't know if you have, but the idea of people either crap on AI altogether or go all in. There's this middle area. Like, I'm using generative AI in some of my work, but it would be like, for example, as we're recording this yesterday, I got a Google alert for something that showed up, an article I wrote a long time ago called "How to Conquer Your Day." And it's on my blog. I'll link to it here in the show notes, as well as on YouTube. But I'm like, okay, so this clearly pinged somewhere. So what do I do with that? Do I rewrite the article? I'm like, no, what I should do is take this, put it into ChatGPT-4 or Claude or whatever, and say, turn this article I wrote into a LinkedIn post, a Twitter thread, et cetera, or X thread. Sorry. And that to me is, again, an example of, and by the way, I'm not going to be clear, it does it, and then I look at it. It's not like I go, that's what it is, and I post it, right? I mean, heck, even these tools say, make sure to look at this to change it to your voice or whatever. I mean, I'm already doing that. But But instead of me spending time, especially as a smaller business, going, okay, let me find a social media marketing person that'll do this, et cetera. Like that to me is helpful. But there's some people who are getting it to write entire books or write like, and that's what that leads to, as far as I'm concerned, is we're back to the content farm era of like blog posts that are vacuous and empty and are just there to get, they're just trying to game the system that Google has. Google has gotten smarter over the years too, with its, looking at, SEO and so on and so forth. It'll be able to detect that kind of nonsense, right? But to your point, I did a workshop this time last year, actually, in Salt Lake City, a private workshop. And someone's like, well, I don't like, breaking down tasks is huge. You and I both know this. Like most people put on their list, like, work on book or, make YouTube video. It's like, okay, well, that's not, we both know that there's multiple steps in that, but there's a hesitance to, go into that and break it down. And how far do I break it down? And what, to what degree, right? And so I showed this gentleman, he said, yeah, but this is going to take a lot of time. Like I'm like, okay, what are the steps in this particular task that you're talking about? And he told me what it was. And I said, well, as soon as there's multiple steps, technically it's a project, right? Like you could argue in the sense of David Allen's Getting Things Done, anything that's multi-step is a project, right? So I said, well, give me this thing. And I inputted it into, at the time, ChatGPT 3.5. It was, and I asked it to break it down into steps, like tasks. And it did it very quickly. And the look on his face of awe was, wow. Like, I'm like, now it's not going to do these things for you, but imagine that that's the time that you're going to, so your hesitance to, I can't take time to do that, is now moot, right? There are other considerations though, which I think is fascinating. Number one, well, now I have more to do. Not really. You just have more visibility of the things that are already on your list. And that's what apps will also be able to do. Like, I would imagine at some points, like this, if you were to say, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, if you were to, an app that would say, what is your hourly rate, right? Like, so your hourly rate might be $250 an hour. And if you were to tell the app this, let's say ClickUp, Notion, whatever, it could be anything. Break this down and assign the $250 per hour tasks to me. Assign the $50 per hour tasks to this person. Like, it could do that and remove that friction, that decision matrix that you run into. That's something that I could see happening down the line. It could already probably happen now, I would imagine, right? Like, I'm sure you could do that inside of something like Notion or ClickUp or any of these tools that are already leveraging AI, right?
Yeah. I mean, the way that I think about apps in the future is that there'll be two main skills that you'll need with an app: is decisions and creativity. And if like, most of the work will be done for us, it'll be the decisions we make and how they impact. Vice versa with creativity. So they're like the two. So that sort of point is correct. It's like the typical sort of Jarvis from Iron Man approach. I know you're DC, but
no. I've got Vision back here. Like, Vision is my jam. Perfect. And Vision was Jarvis in the MCU. So no. I'm on board with that. One of my favorite lines from Vision is, humans are odd. They think order and chaos are two different things, right? Like, I love Vision. He's one of my favorites. And Jarvis is, but yes, Jarvis, you like all that stuff. Or, what's her name? Friday, who is the successor of Jarvis, right?
They're only good, right? If Tony Stark tells them good things, right?
Yes. Yeah.
It'll be the same with productivity apps. They'll only be more productive if we tell them to be smarter.
Right. So
at least
let's
for the
go
first 5
years. Well, what was the one AI tool? They had to change their name from Jarvis to Jasper because of Marvel. I think that was probably what it was.
Oh, really?
They might have had to. Well, they were called Jarvis, and then they became Jasper. And I don't know why, but I think it had something to do with that, I would imagine.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I can imagine too.
Don has a question. Your pinned tweet says, I've reviewed 700 plus productivity apps in 10 years. I've only used 2 to-do lists app during that time. So could you expand on that? And could that mean for you, like, why those 2 have stuck around? Or, I mean, you've obviously talked about your curiosity towards apps, but the fact that that's your pinned tweet, number one, why is that your pinned tweet? I think is another good question. What, like, Because people will think like, there is a lot of shiny object stuff when it comes to apps, right? There is tons of that.
Yeah.
So expand upon that tweet that you've put up there, and maybe the 2 apps that you have maintained that entire time. And is that pin tweet even still true?
Yes, it probably is. Maybe add a few more apps from today. Yeah, I mean, it's my pin tweet because I think it represents my values with productivity tools quite well. Like I've used Todoist and Sansama over the space of 11 years, I think it is, and Todoist for 9, and Sansama I use for 2. But it shows that if you've found a framework that works for you, like I have, it's a combination of GTD and a bit of sort of revised prioritization systems that I've developed over the years. And I've managed to make it work with Todoist. I haven't gone too complicated, but it's sort of like the sort of car deal, like car salesman, only driving 2 cars, but he's seen 750. Do you know what I mean? Like it's the fact that I haven't used them all, and that you don't need to use them all to get to the point where you need to. You just need to do great research, great trial, and great optimization once you get it. They're the sort of 3 pillars of finding a good productivity tool.
Okay, we're gonna dive into Evernote now for a bit because
I knew it was coming up. You won't leave it alone, mate.
No, well, okay. So the reason is that, and I go back to the quote from Ted Lasso that I love, which is from Walt Whitman: "Be curious, not judgmental." So it's really hard not to see what has happened to Evernote as a early adopter, as an early user, to what it has become. That doesn't mean it's wrong or bad or anything like that. But it, to me, is an example of an app that has definitely shifted within the landscape, but also has shifted its own landscape. And I watched your video. We'll link to the idea of what Evernote has become. There's one where you talk about this is what Bending Spoon is doing, and so on and so forth. And Ryan, the one where you mentioned that Ryan Reynolds is an investor, and so on and so forth. I think that it's interesting the way, and I've heard from other people that that the communication is different depending on where you're at. If you're a user at one level versus another, or whether you're a what do they call it, the certified experts, and so on and so forth, there's different levels of communication, as there should be. The thing that flipped me fully was the free tier change with notification not conveyed very well at all. And I'm sure I'm not alone in that. So when I say that, when you say you're not going to let it go or whatever, it's fine. I know where they're headed, or at least I have a sense that where they're not headed at this point. So I'd love to hear, because you've done a lot of videos about this. Is Evernote still for you? What are your Evernote alternatives?
Yeah.
The different types. The journey of Evernote in terms of reliability, I think that's a big thing to take into account too. It's not Bending Spoon's issue. It's all of the journey from Phil to Chris O'Neill being the CEO, to all of that stuff.
Yeah.
That to me is almost like that's the fascinating part. So to me, I'm wondering what, because now you're at a point where you are somebody that people look at in this space. You're an authority, right? And what are your thoughts on the whole evolution of Evernote from what it was when we first had a conversation about hey, keeping up with apps should be fun for you, to where we're at now, which is keeping up with apps is now what you do because you've leaned in hard, and Evernote has been part of that entire landscape for you.
Yeah. I mean, like you, Mike, that relationship with Evernote is so strong. There's something that you always love about what they've done. But I think it's when Phil left and Chris came in and then Ian came in and then Bending Spoons took over, I think that's a lot of wear on people's brand value with them. And I think if Bending Spoons came in after Phil, or maybe even Chris, I think that people would be okay, this is understandable. You need to make money. You got to do this. You're going to restructure. That's fine. But I think because there were so many passing of hands, that it just became a bit too much for the average user.
Right.
And I think they're basically now turning from a community company to a mainstream productivity software.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually think, like, I find this example, my dad, right? I remember when I was sort of getting into this a couple of years in, and he, like, over a weekend, he showed me this app, and he was like, "Oh, I use this for my note taking." And I looked at it; it was like Awesome Note 2, and I was like, "Dad, this is really obscure."
Yeah.
I don't know this. I mean, I know it, but I don't really know it, because it's one that you find on the App Store, and you
Mm-hmm.
just download and start using it. And I think Evernote's going to get to that point where they go so mainstream and so readily available that they're just the app that everyone downloads when they got an iPhone, and it's the mainstream people. It's not us productivity nerd community type folks. Do you know what I mean?
Would you argue that, okay, so remember in Adam Grant's book Originals, he talks about, there's that point where he brings up that people who download Chrome or Firefox as their browser, as opposed to going with the default browser of Safari or Bing, there is a more propensity for them to use third-party applications. I don't know that on Apple devices. First off, you and I both know what Apple does. I mean, we're seeing it with Journal right now, right? They are slowly but surely embedding some of the cool things that other tools would do already. I mean, audio recordings is one, but even the extensions capability, because they have such a tight rein and tight leash on the software, or on the hardware rather, the whole ecosystem really, that you could squeeze a third party out. I mean, the whole Dropbox purchase that Apple almost did is a good example of that, because they're like, fine, you're not going to sell to us. We'll just build iCloud and see how that goes for us. And now, I mean, Dropbox has changed their business model as well. I wonder if Evernote becomes the third party de facto, not the thing. So for example, if you're on an Apple or Mac, you get notes. If you're on Microsoft, you know, OneNote is still there. It's an example of a languishing app, if I've ever heard one, though, right? Like, it is like, they're like, we have this thing, what should we do with it? I'm like, do the thing with it. Like, do what Evernote did. Like, do it. Like, just Google, of course, they have Keep, which is another, like, so there's nothing really quite like Evernote, as you pointed out. So it becomes, I mean, if they can focus on, you know, first off, I think, to your point, I think what they're doing is they're reducing their user base to the kind of users that they want. And then they're going to go, boom, then they're going to push it out, like you say. But I don't know that they're going to be, I think they will probably be the, quote, alternative for those that are like, Notes isn't for me, or I want something, I don't want all my stuff in Apple, or I don't want all my stuff in Microsoft. I want it somewhere else. I think that's
going to be the next nearest option. Yeah. I think I'm just, my sort of marker for when this will hit capacity will be when my mother-in-law tells me I've got it. That's like that is the marker. So when I hear that, I will be able to say mainstream.
My mother-in-law is here right now as we're recording this episode. She's here visiting because my daughter's coming back from Europe, and she wants. And yesterday, as we're recording this, yesterday they announced when the Apple Vision Pro is coming out, and I'm like, you need this. Like, you should buy that. I mean, that's going to be when, but that's a whole other conversation down the line. I'm wondering what apps are going to look like for the Vision Pro when it finally like becomes mainstream, because it's not going to be mainstream for a long time. You're not going to buy one, are you? You're not going to buy a Vision Pro, are you?
I can't. UK.
Oh, right. I don't know if you can in Canada yet either. I mean, we'll have to do the same thing we do with iPhone, is buy one and then, like, off eBay, which, good luck with that. Or maybe I'll ask David. I'll ask David Sparks to pick me up a second one.
Yeah, David will do it. Little tip in there, you'll love it.
But I want to circle back to the kids thing, because, you know, as we're getting close to time, and I want to be respectful of time. When we first chatted and about you going down this path for, you know, experimenting with apps, looking at apps, it was you and your partner, right? Like, that was what, and there was no children in the mix. There are 2 children in the mix now. How do you keep up and navigate? You've got a team, I know this, but it's not a huge team, right? It's not a big team, I don't think, is it?
No, we've even downsized since
Right, right.
as well. Yeah.
So how do you navigate the upkeep of, because there, I mean, look at Todoist, for example. I mean, Todoist has literally made some pretty quick changes over the last, several months, in terms of UI, now the calendar stuff that they're like all this stuff. How do you balance that upkeep that I was concerned
Mm.
about when I said, hey, once a kid shows up, like good luck keeping up with the developers that have a team that are pushing updates to innovate. And you're the guy that tells everybody, hey, well, here's the change, here's this, here's that. How have you been navigating that, and how do you navigate that?
Um, I don't really have any rules, I'd say.
Okay.
Um, I think along the way, like I've sort of prepared myself a lot. So obviously speaking with yourself, Steve,
Mm-hmm.
um, you're sort of like my internet uncles. Um, and also like I remember talking a lot with Amir, who
Mm-hmm.
is the founder of Todoist. Basically anyone in the space that had a kid just took as much advice that I could. And I I would say the way that I keep updated with it is it's great relationships with the vendors who make the productivity software, which I've been very lucky to build over the years because I'm able to get sort of respectful embargoes before they're released and sort of keep updated just great communication. And then also prioritization. Like I think I've just learned how to prioritize because like anyone knows that as a kid, um, your time just evaporates around you. And I think that's all it was. It was like you've now just got this small Pomodoro timer knocking about the house. So you got to make a task into a smaller task, but make it twice the energy. Um, and that's how I would
No,
say
I get
prioritization
it.
and relationships.
It's almost like it's ad hoc by design, but you know what I mean? Like there has to, because you don't know. Like that
Yeah,
there are things happening, but things can happen at random intervals, and there's only so much
yeah.
attention that you have to go around. Um, Here we go. Here we go. Andrew's got a question here on YouTube. How do you see planners picking up more? So, for example,
Mm.
Andrew attempted to drop Todoist for Notion, but just
Hmm.
ended up with Akiflow, which I know you've used as
Mm.
you've played with. For
Yeah.
now, really hard to find something that sticks. So
Yeah.
that's going to lead nicely into some of the final questions I have. So how do you see, and I guess it's the idea of dropping Todoist for Notion, then going to Akiflow. Like, I wonder, is that a Notion? Because Notion is so, and that's one of the things we're working on is a Notion program for time crafting. That's the next time
Mm.
crafting in series that we'll be releasing late, in early 2024 here. Um, I look at it and I'm overwhelmed by it. Like there is just so
Mm.
much there in Notion. Do you think that that's the problem, is the because you can do anything with it, it overwhelms you. And there's
Mm.
lots of resources out there for it. I mean, Thomas Frank is just one. Marie Poulin is another. I mean, is that part of it? Do you think the equation of like so many things that like Notion almost to me feels like it better be an end stop, not a, you better just decide that that's what it is. Otherwise, just skip right over it and go from Todoist to Akiflow or to Noteplan or anything like that.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like what Andrew's done is done a sort of like intensity scale. Todoist being the low intensity, Notion being the high intensity, and sort of he's met in the middle with Akiflow, and he
Yeah.
thinks that's the right tool for him.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, it's a really difficult one because, like, again, if you're still umming and ahhing about if this is the right tool for you, then I think you have to go back to the basics, the sort of three-part process: research and spending a good amount of time on research. In the meantime, you can use whatever app you're using, sort of survive, if or paper.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but research and spending that time on the fundamentals is really important. So even matching it with the framework that you have is actually really, really important. Then it's once you've found one, and maybe this is where you're in sort of Akiflow, is doing a trial of 90 days where you commit to 90 days of using the software. And during that time period, you make journalize notes about what is good and what is bad about the software. Whether you use it or not, it allows you, when you come back to the research, number one, to have good notes on how to improve your research for next time. And they'll be much more precise. And then if you manage to get through, step 3 is optimize. So it's really just digging deeper in the tool, looking at industry experts that use tools like you do and how you can use them, like, well, how they use them. So I would go back to the basics, but if Andrew needs any help, he can reach out on email. I'm happy to chat with them through stuff.
Justin brings up a good point in the comments, and this is something that I think relates directly into why I think Notion and Evernote are like, Notion is the successor to Evernote in terms of the way that this thing kind of is shaken out over the years in the landscape. So Justin says, Notion's one of those things that does so many things just okay, that unless you can grapple with its limitations, then it's really hard to adapt consistently. And that reminds me of people trying to use Evernote for task management, for project. I mean, that's not really, like, you can do it, but you better be ready to deal with some of the friction that comes with that. Now, Notion, I think, has a lot more going for it in that regard. There's a lot more flexibility. But Don brings up a good point in the chat. He says, but there's so much of an empty canvas that can be the paralyzing factor, right? Why?
Yeah.
What do you think in terms, like, Notion's got such a massive user base? Is it because it can do so much in a reasonable way as opposed to anything really well? Like, what has led to Notion's, like, basically becoming Evernote 2.0 as terms of the darling or the unicorn in the productivity app space?
Yeah, like you said, it's Notion does things 85% well.
Right.
And then, you know, like, it's a classic framework of you need 3 apps, right? The typical 3 apps do pretty much 95 to 100% things well. Todoist, tasks, brilliant. Calendar, fantastical, 100% brilliant, you know, and so on and so forth. But there's sort of like this needle now of 1, 2, or 3 apps. And it's like the traditionalists go for 3 apps. The sort of modern age sort of go for 2 apps, like a hybrid of 2 apps that solve the 3 problems. And then some people go 1 app, but they can't expect it to solve all of the problems because it's not perfect, you know? So I think people think that because people talk about Notion like it solves their life on YouTube, people think it's the solution to go for.
That is so okay. So this is a classic example of my earlier question, where it's like, you've gone from, like, somebody who is, like, starting to, like, you are willing to make a statement like that without, like, that's so awesome, because I mean, it's so hard to go, like,
glad.
there is this alienation factor that can come up, and you don't have any fear, which I totally admire, because that's hard to do when you are serving so many, quote, masters in terms of, like, the apps and the audience and then other people who are into this space, right? But yeah, like, it's you know, to me, what I love is, and I can't remember where you posted this. Did you post this in Keep Productive or your own, where you said that there's going to be a bit of a shift? I think it was with Keep Productive, which is more about like you talked about, the mindfulness, the thoughtfulness aspect, as opposed to just solely the tools, which I imagine it's largely due to the Toolfinder component that you have. But what has changed about your thoughts around productivity and time management during your journey over the last, you know, number of years that you've been doing this?
I think that it's just that, like, I always go, I don't read a lot of philosophy, but I like to read and learn about the sort of the old age times, you know, Roman times and things like that. And it's like, you know, all of these people did things with paper.
Yep.
So when you get that in your mind, anything, I think that's when the expectations get dramatically reduced.
Right.
So I think if you have that in your mind, that people did great things with less than you did, then I think that changes your perspective on software. And then you get a less than your bee in your bonnet, I think.
1 second, just 1 second, everybody. I'm on a live stream right now, but I have to deal with something really quickly, Francesco. So
Shall I entertain?
Yeah, please. Okay, right now, the most promising app that you've seen in 2024 while I step away for a second. Okay, so the most promising app that you've come across, and I'll be right back.
So, who bets why Mike is going away? What are the A, B, and C options? Put them in the chat. I can't see the chat, so we can come back to it. Promising app for 2024. I'm really interested in Superlist, which is a task management app that will have some note-taking abilities. I think that's like on my radar. I think there's a dramatic influx in Notion alternatives that are going to really dramatically move Notion out of the way in this year, especially for personal users. Apps like Affine Pro, I think that will be really interesting. Solved it.
Go. What did I miss? I'm going to have to listen back to this recording to see what
you are. Is anybody put anything in the chat?
So again, speaking of, you were talking, actually, it's quite funny. And of course, this may not make the final broadcast, but I think it's hilarious anyway. Is that you were, before you got on the call, before we went live, you were wearing like your puffy jacket, right? Because the heat.
Warmed up now.
Well, today at noon, we have a scheduled maintenance appointment for our own heating system. It's not noon yet. So he showed up early, and it's just me and my mother-in-law's here, of course. So I'm like, okay, I have to. So I'll have to listen back to see what the recommendation was. My recommendation right now, honestly, I love my. I mean, Are you using paper still? Like, you use a mix, right? Or are you strictly digital? Because I'm using ClickUp and Todoist, but then I will take the things that I want to focus on during the day and bring them into this Midori Traveler's Notebook, so that I can have I can concentrate on them, that highest level of attention. What about you?
Yeah. I have a Remarkable that I use. So I use that. I take that out and do it. So I like close. If I'm doing like a we go away and do like a 3 monthly sort of retreat type of thing, I'll take paper mainly, A3. Slam that all in there. Yeah, it works beautifully.
Francesco, this has been a great conversation, long overdue. Thanks so much for taking the time to be here with me on the live stream, as well as recording this episode of A Productive Conversation. Where can people keep up with the work that you're doing, as well as, pretty much what you've got going on? I'd love for you to share. You've got a lot of irons in the fire, so go ahead.
Thanks, Mike, for having us. And I think in general, like people can find me mainly over on Toolfinder. It's basically the best place to find a productivity tool, and we're sort of optimizing it even further. And then on YouTube, if they type in Keep Productive, they can find me there too. So yeah, thank you for having me, Mike.
Thanks so much for having a productive conversation. As expected, a very productive conversation with me today. All right, everybody, we are done the recording. That was hilarious that happened. I was I thought it might. I'm like, what if they show up early? They did not show. They did show up early. So,
it always happens, doesn't it?
It always happens. Well, the difference is when you're on a live stream, you have a choice: end the live stream or just, So there you go. All right, we're gonna end the live stream now. Thank you. Oh, you got your thumbs up thing happening.
Oh wow, I didn't even see that. That's mad, isn't it?
So, Francesco, you're going to stick around for a bit, like behind the scenes. I want to catch up if you've got a few minutes.
Yeah, that'd be nice. Yeah, that'd be lovely. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. All right, everybody. Thanks so much for taking the time to join us on the live stream. We'll be publishing this episode in a couple of weeks, the audio version of it. If you have any comments or, the whole usual thing, like, subscribe, we'll be doing more of that stuff here. So again, thanks so much for taking the time to be here today. See you later.
Cheerio.